discussing the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. And thus far, we've discussed the 2 senior most of the 6 Goswamis, Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami. And now we will be discussing Jiva Goswami. You see the dates of Jiva Goswami's life: 5/11, 1511 to 1596. He lived a long life. And Jiva Goswami, there are many things that can be said about him in glorification, but you see what he's doing here, he's writing. And he was the most prolific writer amongst the 6 Goswamis. He wrote 25 books, and those books consisted of 400,000 verses. We shared yesterday, Rupa Goswami wrote 100,000 verses in 16 books. Jiva Goswami wrote 400,000 verses in 25 books. And not unlike Rupa Goswami, but like Rupa Goswami, they were very profound. They were expressing fundamental teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One can say that along with Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami's writings are the conclusive truths by which the followers of Lord Chaitanya adhere. His position is extremely important for our lives today and in future generations, because he's established the fundamental conclusions of Lord Chaitanya's teachings, which are the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, others were also lovers of Srimad Bhagavatam, the other 6 Goswamis. At the same time, none of them wrote as prolifically as Jiva Goswami in very precise terms about the nature of the Bhagavad Tattva, the teachings of Krishna, Srimad Bhagavatam. So hopefully technology is going to cooperate. There we go. A little bit about his life. When he was a young boy, he was born in Ramakeli, the place where Lord Chaitanya met Rupa and Sanatan. He was born the son of their 3rd brother, Anupam. You see a photo of Krishna Balaram deities. And the reason you see them is because when he was very small, he worshipped Krishna Balaram deities. And it wasn't just like child play. He loved them very much. He was with them day and night. And he would make offerings and cook things and distribute the remnants to his friends. And his life was Krishna Balaram. And he would cry seeing them. He was very attached to Krishna. And because his uncles, as well as his brothers, his father, were very attached to Lord Chaitanya, he also became very attached to Lord Chaitanya. It is said that when he was a young boy, one evening in a dream, his deities appeared, and he was surcharged with ecstasy seeing his deities in his dream. And then suddenly they transformed themselves into Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda and smiled, and then transformed themselves back into his deities of Krishna Balaram. Now he's known for his writing, but you'll see when we see the list of his 25 books, he understood and was deeply attached to deity worship as well. It's not clear from his biography, did he meet Lord Chaitanya? Some biographies say when he was just a small child, that's when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited Ramakeli. And although small child, he saw or was in the presence of Lord Chaitanya. Others are silent on that. But whether he met Lord Chaitanya or didn't meet Lord Chaitanya, he certainly heard about Lord Chaitanya from his uncles and his father and other devotees. So he was very fascinated with Krishna Balaram and with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda. The descriptions of his childhood include his incredible mastery of Sanskrit and any subject matters that were placed before him. His intellect was incomparable from early childhood. With the permission of his mother, he made a visit to the place of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes in Navadvip. And when he reached Navadvip, much to his surprise, Lord Nityananda was there waiting for him. Omniscient Lord Nityananda knew that Jiva was making his way to see the places of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. So he came, and he was at the house of Srivas Pandit. When Jiva Goswami arrived, he heard that Lord Nityananda was there. So he went swiftly to the house of Srivas Pandit. And who was there to receive him but Lord Nityananda himself? And he fell before Lord Nityananda's feet. He had never seen him, but he heard of him, and immediately he understood, this is Lord Nityananda. Lord Nityananda picked him up, embraced him, and asked him, are you the son of Vallabha, the brother of Rupa and Sanatana? That was their introduction. In the course of Lord Nityananda giving his mercy to little or young Jiva, you'll see this in this background of the painting is Lord Nityananda described the Adbhuta Mandir that's told about in the Ananta Samhita. And at Jiva's request, Lord Nityananda took him on a very detailed tour or parikrama of the places of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. And this tour of Lord Chaitanya's pastime places was described in a book by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And there's another painting of the same young Jiva and Lord Nityananda with the Adbhuta Mandir in the background. He, very ecstatic exchange between the two, Lord Nityananda and Jiva Goswami. And it's an important principle that we learn about getting entrance into Vrindavan and getting entrance into association with Radha and Krishna. It's through the mercy of Lord Nityananda. So Lord Nityananda gave him that residence. This is a modern ISKCON painting. That Adbhuta Mandir is by gesture is the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, etc., rising tall into the sky. And Lord Nityananda then gave him two instructions. Go take shelter of your two uncles, Rupa and Sanatana. and dedicate your life to assisting them in serving Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the second instruction he gave him was, before you go to Vrindavan, go first to Benares, and while in Benares, you should study under Madhusudana Vachaspati. Madhusudana Vachaspati was a highly educated Vaishnav, a disciple of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya from Puri, and he was now residing in Benares. Benares is, even today, and at that time as well, known as a seat of higher learning, very great scholars, many great scholars. Of course, it's also known for other things, impersonalism, but scholarship in the Vedas. But Madhusudana Vachaspati was not just a scholar in the Vedas like the other learned persons in Benares. He was a great Vaishnav, and it's described that he gave Jiva Goswami a comprehensive understanding of what's known as the 6 darshans, or the 6 non-devotional interpretations of Vedanta. Very important, as well as the Vaishnava interpretations of Vedanta, which means that before he went to Vrindavan, he was prepared to write literature that could refute in detail, because he knew the details of the non-devotional interpretations of Vedanta. When he was just 20, is when he traveled from Benares to Vrindavan. He had begun Sarva Samvadani. Sarva Samvadani is today's Jiva Goswami's commentary on the Sandarbhas. Jiva Goswami wrote the Sandarbhas, and Jiva Goswami wrote a commentary on the Sandarbhas. That commentary is known as Sarva Samvadani. He had not yet composed the Sandarbhas, but he was preparing himself to make a comprehensive explanation of Vedanta Sutra. And so in this Sarva Samvadani, the scholarship was so astounding that even during his youth, he was a celebrated person, making reference to commentaries on Vedanta Sutra from the different sampradayas, from Madhva, from Ramanuja and his followers, and Madhusudana Vachaspati's commentaries. He was a student, and Madhusudana Vachaspati was his elevated teacher. It is said that even today at Benares University, there's a whole department in Benares University that just studies the writings of Jiva Goswami. Very powerful, even as a young man. And as was his desire, as well as the instruction of Lord Nityananda, he then went to Vrindavan. When he went to Vrindavan, he was greeted by Rupa and Sanatan, his 2 uncles, and treated very affectionately, just like a son. There's a little description, not confirmed in others, but where he requested Sanatan Goswami to give him mantra diksha. Sanatan Goswami referred him to Rupa Goswami, who before giving him mantra diksha wanted to test him. So he tested, and the main feature he wanted to test was his humble service mood. And therefore, Jiva was given menial services for him and Sanatan Goswami, for Rupa and Sanatan. He served them as a young boy or young man serves a master like his father or like his gurus. and cleaning, preparing the leaves, a special procedure for preparing leaves for writing on, which was Rupa Goswami's work. Any simple menial service. In addition, Rupa Goswami had him proofread, because he was a scholar, proofread his writings. In the course of proofreading his writings, Jiva Goswami made commentaries on those writings. Sanatana Goswami wrote a commentary on the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, and Jiva Goswami wrote a commentary on his commentary of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, wrote a commentary on everything that he was asked to proofread. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu commentary, Ujjvala Nilamani commentary, Vaishnava Toshini commentary, like exhaustive commentary on these writings of Rupa and Sanatan. And as you see in the painting, one of the things that Jiva Goswami, as the next Acharya in the line of the Goswamis, Lord Chaitanya, following him, Rupa and Sanatan, following them, Jiva, one of his wonderful contributions to us and to Lord Chaitanya was training these three. Srinivasacharya, Narottam Das Thakur, and Shyamananda Pandit. In fact, he gave them their titles and he trained them exhaustively, comprehensively in the writings of the Goswamis, as well as his own, so that they would understand the conclusions of the truths that Jiva Goswami had received from Rupa. We heard yesterday how Rupa was empowered. Repeatedly, Chaitanya Charitamrita describes, is fully empowered. Lord Chaitanya entered into the heart of Rupa Goswami and empowered him to understand and present the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which were then passed on to Jiva, which are, as you see here, are being passed on to the next generation of acharyas leading the whole sampradaya. Fantastic, very important contribution of Jiva Goswami to our sampradaya. And in addition to training them, he did what was asked of Rupa Goswami in practical terms, because he was very practical. Although he wasn't just a scholar with his head in the clouds, he was very practical. Jiva Goswami sent them, the three of them, with a bullock cart load of the Goswami literature, because the circumstance, as a picture in your mind, I'm sure, Lord Chaitanya sent his most eminent followers to Vrindavan. So Vrindavan was the epicenter of Lord Chaitanya's followers and his teachings and carrying on the legacy of Lord Chaitanya, etc., etc. Whereas the eastern part of India didn't have that same energy, spiritual energy invested in it to sustain and maintain the purity and the understanding of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Chaitanya's teachings. So what happens in a vacuum? Two things. Things start to sag and misunderstandings arise. There were, even during their time, there were deviated sampradayas, persons that were taking the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and distorting them to suit their fancy. And, charismatic persons leading people in not necessarily the right direction. So this was a concern. It was a concern that Janava had, because Janava was in the eastern part of India, not so much in Vrindavan. She visited, but that wasn't her place. So she sent a message to Jiva Goswami, please provide these literatures and those who can teach these literatures to the eastern parts of India, so that Lord Chaitanya's mission and his teachings are held intact. So sure enough, that's what Jiva Goswami did. It was his inspiration as well. But then as a result, the teaching, there was no printing presses, but the original writings or copies of the original writings of the Goswamis was now made available at least to educated people outside of Vrindavan. Great contribution, as we're doing even now. It's, it's December Marathon, and it's just following Jiva Goswami, who was following Rupa Goswami, who was following Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But Jiva Goswami started it, or led the way in presenting the teachings of Lord Chaitanya throughout the land. These are, I hope you're appreciating, I'll say it again. Some of the major contributions of Jiva Goswami include his writing, his training the next generation, his propagating the teachings by distributing the writings of the Goswamis, and his very elevated position of deity worship, although Gopal Bhatta is primarily attributed to being the deity worship acharya. Jiva Goswami wrote books on establishing the authority behind worship of Radha and Krishna and how to do it. We'll show you in a moment. This is an example of the handwriting of Jiva Goswami. Here's a list found in Bhakti Ratnakar of the 25 books. I'll just go through them quickly, at least most of them. Right at the top, Harinama Amrita, Vyakarana. During Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's period in Navadvip, where he was teaching grammar, after he had received initiation, he started teaching grammar using names of Krishna. Jiva Goswami wrote the book of teaching Sanskrit grammar using names of Krishna. And it's brilliant, of course, but it's all the rules of grammar, all the rules, it's a lot of rules, and all in one text. To learn the rules of grammar in Sanskrit, entirely resting upon names of Krishna or Hari. In our Gurukulas, to this day, this is what's taught when teaching the boys Sanskrit. Gopal Champu, you've heard. It's a very celebrated book. And Gopal Champu is a description of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. And then the Uttara portion of Gopal Champu is Krishna's pastimes outside of Vrindavan. And it's like a rewrite of the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam in a particular literary style. The particular literary style is called Champu. And there's rules for a champu. In fact, one of his books, not listed here, but he wrote a book on how to write a champu. And then he wrote two of them. And Gopal Champu is one. And in Vrindavan and outside of Vrindavan, there's details. Then number 3 is Krama Sandarbha. which is something like what Prabhupada did. It's the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, 12 cantos, verse by verse, although what he did was selected verses. Not every single verse has a purport, but he wrote commentary for the entire 12 cantos of Bhagavatam called Krama Sandarbha. And then the next 6 or 4 through 9, is the 6 Sandarbhas. And they're very logical. Tattva Sandarbha, Bhagavat Sandarbha, Paramatma Sandarbha, Krishna Sandarbha, Bhakti Sandarbha. The first 4 are Sambandha teachings, just as the Vedanta Sutra has these same 3 divisions, Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. Then Bhakti Sandarbha is the Abhideya teachings. It's the largest of the Sandarbhas. And Priti Sandarbha, the essence, the culmination of all the teachings of the Bhagavatam. So that's his most renowned book, the 6 Sandarbhas. This next one, Radha Krishnarchana Deepika, is details, in case you didn't know. He liked deity worship and details of the worship of Radha and Krishna together, which later became a question, which Baladev Vidyabhusan had to respond to. But some of the elements are found right here in this writing of Jiva Goswami. Madhava Mahotsava, very interesting book. It's translated and available in English. It's called Madhava Mahotsav. It's in 2 parts. The first part is Radha and Krishna are having a dispute. And Radha goes and pouts, or she's in her Man Leela. And Krishna's wanting her to break her man, and Purnamasi helps. And then the second half is Radha is crowned as Queen of Vrindavan. That's the second half. It's a very detailed description of the celebration of Radha becoming Queen of Vrindavan, presided over by Madhava. So although it's about her, it's called Madhava Mahotsava. Number 12 is Gopal Tapani. It's one of the most exalted of the Upanishads. He wrote a commentary on it. As we know, he wrote a commentary on Brahma Samhita, which we now have in English. It's Bhaktisiddhanta's translation of Bhaktivinoda's Bengali version, which is a translation of Jiva Goswami's Sanskrit version of commentary on Brahma Samhita. And Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, number 14, and Ujjvala Nilamani, number 15, his commentaries on those, and so forth, and so forth. Commentary on Gayatri Mantra as taught in Agni Purana, commentary on Padma Purana's description of Krishna's lotus feet, commentary on Radharani's lotus feet and the markings. It's very absorbed, very absorbed. And 400,000 verses. Here's a photograph of an alligator or crocodile in a cave by the side of some river. You can see his big jaws and big teeth. This is indicating, the photograph is meant to indicate an event in his life. There was a scholar who came to town, a Digvijay. That means, he would argue and debate and try to be victorious and defeat the most scholarly people wherever he went. But when he went to Vrindavan, he was told the most scholarly person was Rupa. So he went to Rupa and challenged him for a debate. And Rupa had no interest in debate. Vaishnavas don't do those things. And so, generally, and so he said, "Oh, you're too great of a scholar. How can I have a debate with you?" And well, then you acknowledge your debate by signing. You've been defeated by me. So he did. That came to be known by Jiva because the scholar then asked, who else is the scholarly person here? And it was Jiva. So he went to Jiva. He said, even your teacher was defeated by me. Just see, here's his signature. So I'm ready for a debate with you. And to uphold the honor of Rupa, Jiva debated him, and the scholar was defeated. So when Jiva informed Rupa Goswami that I defended your honor, Rupa was not pleased. And we don't do these things. He was a mundane, wrangling person. Vaishnavas may have some elevated discussions on different topics, but just arguing with a mundane person, Vaishnavas don't do. So he said, "This isn't good. You're too proud of your scholarship, and so you are not eligible to live in Vrindavan. You leave until you can become more humble," or something like that. And so, instructed by Rupa Goswami, he left. He left Vrindavan and went to Mathura along the banks of the Jamuna at a place now known as Nandaghat. And in the course of his doing Madhukari, we heard the first evening about Sanatana Goswami. He would do Madhukari, travel from place to place, home to home, village to village, and accept alms from people. As he was doing Madhukari in Mathura, he was told about one sadhu. They didn't know who he was. But one sadhu was living in an alligator cave. And he hardly eats anything, and he's thin and emaciated, and we're very concerned about his well-being. Maybe you can do something to help him. So they took him to where Jiva Goswami was. And when he saw his condition, he was shocked. He is emaciated and not keeping proper health. So he then brought him back to Vrindavan and had him, there's different versions, but standing outside of the Bhajan Kutir, out of sight of Rupa, and asking Rupa, out of Lord Chaitanya's teaching, what is the most important quality for a Vaishnav? That's one version. And his answer was Jivadaya. He said, very good. Here's one, Jiva, please be merciful to him. And in this way, Jiva resumed his service to Rupa. And here's his Samadhi Mandir, as you see on the sign here. This is in to the left of the Radha Damodar temple. Here's what's inside his Samadhi area. This is a Bhajan Kutir. Here's the chanting beads of Jiva Goswami. And here's the courtyard, and up those steps, that's where the altar is for the Radha Damodar deities. Here's the full altar. And as you see in this front of Radha Damodar in the middle, Radha Damodar are in the middle. There's the Shila, it is said at least, is the Shila that was given to Sanatana Goswami for him to place Krishna put his foot, make a mark on the Shila where his footprint was. So Sanatana Goswami could circumambulate the Shila instead of the whole of Govardhan. When Sanatana Goswami left his body, there was a grand procession to bring his body to his place of samadhi by the Madan Mohan temple. And this Shila was brought to the Radha Damodar temple because it was known that Radha Damodar temple is a place where there's very elevated standards of deity worship. On the altar, there's a lot of Radha Krishna deities, and principal is at the center. These are not the original Radha Damodar deities that Jiva Goswami worshipped, but they're the replacement deities or pratibhu deities. And on the altar are deities of Bhugarbha Goswami and deities of, let's see, here we go. Yeah, Krishna Das Kaviraj on the far left, Krishna Das Kaviraj deities of Radha Krishna, known as Radha Vrindavan Chandra. And next to, in the center here, is Radha Damodar with Lalita by Krishna's side. Jayadev Goswami's deities. Now, Jayadev Goswami lived for some time in Vrindavan, and deities that were worshipped by or pratibhu deities of his deities are there, Radha Madhava. And Bhugarbha Goswami's deities, there's his way over on the far right of this photograph, or their left, but our right. Radha Chanchi Kaniya. Bhugarbha Goswami, most of you know, he was a very dear friend of Lokanath. And Lokanath and Bhugarbha came to Vrindavan ahead of Lord Chaitanya with the idea of being his associates in Vrindavan when he arrived after taking sannyas. Here's another photograph of the deities with their names. Radha Vrindavan Chandra on our left, or the deity's right. Radha Damodar with Lalita. Jayadev Goswami's deities, Radha Madhava, and Radha Chanchi Kaniya. And in the front is Govardhan Shila of Sanatan Goswami. Very busy altar, huh? Here's a close-up of that Radha Damodar deity in Vrindavan. And here's the deities on Akshay Purnima. And these are the deities in Jaipur. The deities in Jaipur, the deity of Radha Damodar that was worshipped by Rupa Goswami was given to him, worshipped by Jiva Goswami, was given to him by Rupa Goswami to worship. It is said, standard teaching, that with his own hand, he didn't just go to a shop to purchase some Radha Krishna deities. With his own hand, Rupa Goswami carved these deities for Jiva Goswami to worship. It is said he was so intimate, Jiva Goswami was so intimate with his worship of the deity, that sometimes he would sing and the deity would play his flute. And sometimes he would sing and the deity would dance. They were very intimate exchanges, loving exchanges, and a very beautiful deity indeed. Very beautiful deity. And this is the deity of Radha Damodar, found at Radhakund. And Jiva Goswami formerly was Vilasa Manjari Gopi, who is on the altar right next to Radha Damodar. And looks like that's it. for Jiva Goswami for this morning. Now, in thinking of Jiva Goswami in membership of the 6 Goswamis, most prominent is his prolific writing. But he did many other things to help in service to Lord Chaitanya's mission. And he was not with writing all of what he wrote. Here's some additional contributions he made. When it was time for Raghunath Das Goswami to construct or excavate Radhakund, Jiva Goswami oversaw it. I mean, it was Raghunath Das's desire, Raghunath Das's project. Jiva Goswami oversaw it. Jiva Goswami had the vision of engaging many Brahmins in making hand copies of the writings of the Goswamis. He had a vision to establish a library with, backup copies, because that's all there was, and to preserve the teachings, copies of the literature, and then teaching the meanings of those literatures and arranging for the distribution of those literatures. Very important contributions, each one of them. He had a practical side where he did something that people even today don't commonly do. He had the vision to establish not just the name of the deity, commonly a practice in India, my understanding is, where a deity is, it's the property of the deity. But he made documents to confirm this is the property of the deity, not to be encumbered by or because the Muslim rulers were really cruel. So he made an arrangement with Akbar that there would not be any difficulty given to the temples. Now, Aurangzeb violated that, but he had the foresight to establish that, and it protected the deities and deity properties for some years, some decades, generations. He had the foresight to establish a will, which, sadhus don't normally do. But there's copies of it. In fact, he made a second copy, a more updated copy, specifically where the worship of the deity Radha Damodar would be handed over to a certain person who he trusted. In other words, he wasn't just a head in the clouds, professor that didn't have practical sense of things. A very practical person. Very, very high visionary personality to preserve Lord Chaitanya, propagate, receive, preserve, and propagate Lord Chaitanya's teachings and legacy. Now, it's common, very common, most common, after a charismatic leader of some type or another, it generally takes a spiritual religious leader. It generally takes just 2, at most 3 generations for things to dissipate. Traditionally, there's studies that have been done on this, and it's just the way that it goes. So that he preserved Lord Chaitanya's legacy is a very important contribution. Rupa and Sanatan, and then him, and then the next generation, and then the next generation. He had a very important role to play in upholding what the teachings actually are, because they get distorted traditionally. It happened in Christianity very quickly. Things just disappeared. Things just disappeared. Because people, whatever, They wanted something else, and they took Christianity and made it something else. Just without giving anecdotal examples of it. It's just the way things go. The Jiva Goswami was a very important person in maintaining what that standard is, and to this day. If there's some question on philosophy, whatever Jiva Goswami wrote, that's it. That's it. And one has to, of course, Jiva Goswami was fully aligned with Rupa Goswami, who was fully empowered by Lord Chaitanya to understand and propagate. And he was fully aligned to, and he prolifically wrote about it. So, details and details and details and details. A very important person, very important person. So that's 3 of the 6 Goswamis thus far. We'll continue when I go to the next place, carrying on with this description. Because our lives are we're looking up to these personalities, like Narottam Das Thakur, in that same generation, taught by Rupa Goswami. Anyone who has the favor of the 6 Goswamis, I worship them. One of his songs. I want the dust from their feet. But they're so important. Let us see if there's some discussion. It's now 8:20. All right.
I have a question.
Okay.
So we do see Jiva Goswami, his scriptural intellect. You can say, I don't know what's the right word, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he came in, he also was very, very, very high in scriptures, and he was participating in all the debates, but he was less of a writings. How did that kind of a culture fade away when Jiva Goswami came in? I don't see anything like debates when Jiva Goswami was there.
I'm not sure what you're asking. You're asking how did the teachings that Lord Chaitanya not write get distorted over time?
Yes. And also,
well, because there's different ways. Somebody would take this from Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, and somebody would take that from Lord Chaitanya's teachings and make a big deal about that or this. Mm-hmm. For example, this is, and this is, I heard from Krishna Kshetra Swami, because I never knew the history, but one of the deviated Sampradaya groups took the exchanges between Ramananda Roy and the Devi Dasis and highlighted that. And that's what Lord Chaitanya's teachings are. Do what Ramananda Roy did with the Devi Dasis. And they didn't give it all everything else. And that was Lord Chaitanya and Lord Chaitanya's teachings. So people didn't know. Now, Krishnadas Kaviraj made that whole. And Krishnadas Kaviraj and Jiva Goswami were contemporaries. But, the whole so that's an example of, his pastimes and then his teachings. So people didn't know because it's just word of mouth. There's nothing written. So he made it written from Rupa Goswami and expanded on it. And he knew where persons would take something from the scriptures, because he knew the 6 darshans, that would make it something else. So in his writings, he would present their views and then defeat them. So he just focus in on what the Lord Chaitanya's teaching, or the Bhagavatam, or the Vedic wisdom teaches. And here's what it doesn't teach, and here's why. their view is this, and you present it accurately. And then here's where the holes are in that teaching or the bucket. And then here's the proper understanding. So it's always, and look at what's going on after Prabhupada's time. And he put it in writing. But some people say this and some people say that. It's going on. Today, it's going on. Anything else? Snehavali, I see your hand up. That's fantastic. Let's hear it. Unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and you. Guru Maharaj, thank you for the class. I have 2-3 points.
I can't hear you. Maybe you have to set it into the chat box. Oh.
Can you hear me, Guru Maharaj?
Yeah, you're already unmuted.
Yes, okay.
But you should know, Snehavali, we can't hear you. I see the hand raised, but I don't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Maybe you can send your question to
I
chat
can,
instead.
yeah, I can hear you,
Snehavali.
Mataji, very nicely. I think there's some audio problem on Maharaj's speaker side.
Oh, okay. So, Prem Kishore
No.
Prabhu, I'll just type my question in the chat then.
I hear something. Is your volume down?
Yeah, Mataji, can you speak again?
Yes, Prem Kishore Prabhu, can you hear me?
I
Yeah, I
can't.
can hear you, but this laptop is very low. Yeah, go ahead, Mataji.
Yes, okay. Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Thank you for the class. Guru Maharaj, I had 2-3 points. One was the deities you showed for Jiva Goswami in Jaipur. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Those deities, one of them was the black marble deity, and another one is in the front, which is kind of a brass alloy deity. So which one are the deities which Srila Rupa Goswami carved? Is it the black one, the marble big one, or the small brass alloy deities?
Okay. My understanding of her question is one of the photos showed a deity of a marble Damodar, and by his side was a brass Radharani, and which was the deity that was given to Jiva Goswami by Rupa Goswami. It was the marble deity, the marble Damodar. And the brass Radha came later. It was not part of, at least is my understanding, it was not part of the gift given by Rupa Goswami to Jiva Goswami.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Guru Maharaj. Actually, in the altar, in the front of the marble deities, there is small metal deities also. I thought those are the ones were carved. I'm not sure about it. So is there a small deities also in the front of the altar? They are very small, like 6 to 12 inches deities.
The computer is on the other side of the room and I can't hear. About you and I discussed separately because it's a detail.
Okay,
How's
thank
that?
you. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Huh? Okay, very good. So I see some information in the chat box. And consider the social situation around them. Thanks, Maharaj. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Okay, I guess that's it. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.